You think you just had a great idea. Maybe it came in the shower. Maybe it arrived on a walk, quietly, without warning, the way the best ones always seem to. You felt that unmistakable electric charge, the one that makes you sit up straighter, look around, and reach for something to write on before it disappears. But what if that idea was never yours to begin with? Not in the way you think. Every thought you have ever had started somewhere outside of you. Every concept, every image, every word you have used to understand the world was handed to you before you were old enough to refuse it. Language came first, then culture, then the invisible architecture of every assumption you have never once stopped to examine. You did not build your mind, you were built by it. And the self that feels so certain it is thinking, that self was assembled by forces it will never fully see. And that is only the first layer of the strangeness. The feeling of originality, that unmistakable sense that a thought is genuinely, privately yours, is itself a construction. Psychologist Jung-Beeman at Northwestern University spent years scanning the brains of people in the exact moment of creative insight. The results were disorienting. The neural activity that produces a new idea fires approximately half a second before it arrives in conscious awareness. Your brain generates the thought, then it presents that thought to you, and only then do you claim it. You are not the author of your thoughts, you are the audience. That should feel strange, and it does. But here is why it has never felt strange before today. Your brain runs a continuous background process that researchers call the sense of agency. It is the system that quietly labels your movements, your decisions, and your thoughts as yours rather than as events that are simply happening to you. Without this system, ordinary life would become terrifying. You would reach for a glass of water and not know whether the arm moving toward it belonged to you. You would stand in a room paralyzed by the question of which thoughts were yours and which were noise. This system is ancient. It did not evolve to make you accurate about ownership. It evolved to make you fast. Your ancestors did not survive by deliberating. The hominid who paused to philosophically assess the true source of their fear response was the hominid that became something else's meal. The ones who survived were the ones who acted in milliseconds and narrated the story of why a fraction of a second later. You are the living descendant of an unbroken line of people who felt completely, unshakably certain about decisions they had not consciously made. The feeling of authorship was never designed to be true. It was designed to keep you moving. So where do thoughts actually come from? Begin with language, because language is where almost everything begins. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein made a claim that sounds like poetry but operates like a blueprint. The limits of your language are the limits of your world. If you do not have a word for something, you cannot think that thing with any real precision. You may feel it, something vague and formless moves through you, but it has nowhere to land. No structure to hold it, no way to be examined or shared or acted on. The Japanese concept of mono no aware, the gentle bittersweet sadness at the transience of beautiful things, is not just a phrase. It is a structured emotional experience that speakers of other languages can approximate but cannot fully inhabit without the word that gives it shape. You think inside a cage you cannot see, and someone else built the cage. In 2007, cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky published research that unsettled people in the way that only very solid evidence can. The language you speak shapes how you perceive time, space, color, and causation at the level of basic perception, not as a cultural overlay, but as a structural feature of how your mind processes reality. Russian speakers who have two distinct words for light blue and dark blue that function as categorically different colors rather than shades of the same one can distinguish between those hues faster than English speakers can. Not because their eyes work differently, because their language restructured their attention, and their attention restructured what is real. You see what your language taught you to see. You notice what your language gave you a name for. And your language was handed to you by people who learned it from people who refined it across centuries you were not alive for. Now go deeper than language. Think about the last time you felt genuine ambition, or shame, or pride about something you made. Now ask yourself slowly, who decided those things were worth feeling? Who decided what deserved pride? What deserved shame? What was worth wanting and what should be left behind? Your parents absorbed their value system from their parents. Their parents absorbed it from communities shaped by religious doctrine, political power, and the economic pressures of whoever controlled the land, the food, and the knowledge. Every assumption you hold about what a good life looks like traces back, through a chain of people you will never meet, to a series of accidents, a drought, a plague, a trade route, a war, a single persuasive person standing in a field 500 years ago who said something that spread. You are not a self-made thinker. You are a relay point in a transmission that began long before you existed. And yet you will have a thought today that no exact configuration of neurons in the history of the species has ever produced. That is not an exaggeration. It is literally true, and it matters enormously. Psychologist Margaret Boden at the University of Sussex spent decades mapping the structure of creative thought. She concluded that nearly all original ideas fall into one of three types. Combinational creativity takes two existing concepts and fuses them in a new arrangement. A fork and a knife become a spork. Two musical traditions collide and produce a genre that did not exist before. Exploratory creativity pushes the known edges of an existing conceptual space outward. A composer working in a familiar key who discovers chord progressions no one has traveled before. Transformational creativity is the rarest kind, where the rules of an entire conceptual space are broken and a new one is built from the rubble of the old. Notice what all three share. They all begin with what already exists. The thinkers history calls original were not people who created from nothing. They were people who ingested more, read wider, sat with confusion longer, and allowed existing ideas to collide at unusual velocity. Charles Darwin spent 8 relentless years cataloging barnacles, every species, every variation, every tiny structural difference, before the full shape of natural selection became clear to him. Isaac Newton said he saw further by standing on the shoulders of giants, and he was not being modest. He meant it precisely. Einstein had been carrying a single question since the age of 16. What would the world look like if you could ride alongside a beam of light? Not an answer, just a question held open for a decade. And the holding itself is what made the answer possible. They did not generate novelty from a vacuum. They generated it from density. Your brain does exactly this. Right now, behind what feels like a single, unified stream of conscious thought, something vast is running below the surface. Neuroscientist Marcus Raichle at Washington University in St. Louis identified what he called the default mode network, a constellation of brain regions that activate specifically when you are not focused on any external task. When you daydream. When you drive a route you know by memory. When you stand in the shower and let your mind wander without direction. For most of the 20th century, neuroscientists assumed this network was idle, background noise with no real function. Raichle showed the opposite. It was consuming more energy than almost any other brain state. It was working harder than focused attention. The default mode network is your mind's connection engine. It runs simultaneously through memory, emotion, sensation, and half-formed associations from every corner of your life. It pulls from something you read at 14 that you think you forgot, from something you overheard in a conversation you were not meant to be part of, from the shape of an argument that hurt you years ago and never fully resolved, from the texture of something you touched in a museum in a city you only visited once and will probably never return to. It runs all of this at the same time, searching for configurations, checking for fit, testing whether this fits against that, whether these two things that have never been adjacent might snap together into something whole. And when they do, when the connection forms that has the right shape, it rises into your awareness, and you call it an idea, and you call it yours. And here is the most important thing. You are not wrong. The connections your default mode network makes are shaped by your specific history, your specific wounds and obsessions, the specific texture of your attention, the specific accidents of your particular life. No one else has received precisely your sequence of inputs. No one else has the same arrangement of what was remembered and what was lost, what was felt deeply and what passed through without leaving a mark. The raw materials were borrowed. The configuration is genuinely, irreducibly yours. Originality is not creation from nothing. It has never been that. Originality is recombination that no one else could have performed because no one else has ever lived inside your exact coordinates. Think about the ideas that have moved through the world and changed it. The theory of evolution did not appear in a vacuum. It synthesized decades of geology, animal breeding observations, and the population economics of Thomas Malthus into a framework no one had assembled before. The structure of DNA was proposed by Watson and Crick by building on X-ray crystallography images they had not taken themselves, standing on top of Chargaff's rules and Franklin's data, and decades of biochemistry that came before. Every discovery that looked like a lightning bolt was, on closer examination, a slow accumulation that finally reached the threshold where it could be seen. Your thoughts follow the same logic. The ideas you feel most proud of are rarely the ones that appeared instantly from nowhere. They are the ones that arrived after years of accumulation you did not know was happening, after reading things that seemed unrelated, after living through things you would not have chosen. The question that leads nowhere is, where did this thought come from? The question that opens everything is, what is this thought trying to connect? Because the thoughts that feel most like yours, the ones that interrupt your sleep, the ones that arrive in the shower, the ones you reach for a pen to catch before they vanish, those are not thoughts you generated. They are thoughts your entire life generated. Every book you read and half forgot. Every conversation you left changed without knowing why. Every moment of confusion that slowly, over months or years, resolved into something clear. Every piece of language given to you by someone who is now gone. Your thoughts are a distillation of everyone who has ever touched you. And one day, possibly today, a thought you have will become the raw material for someone else. It will travel into them through a book, a conversation, a sentence you said without knowing it mattered. And it will sit inside them, in the dark, in their default mode network, running alongside other things you will never know, until one day it collides with something uniquely theirs. And they will feel the electric charge, and they will call it their idea, and they will not know it started with you, just as you do not know the full chain it passed through before it reached you. You felt that charge earlier, the one in the shower, on the walk, in the quiet moment where the idea surfaced and you thought, this is mine. You were not wrong about the charge. You were only wrong about where it started. You think you just had a great idea? You did. You absolutely did. But it began long before the shower, long before you were born, long before any word you know existed. It traveled through centuries of language and loss and survival and accident. And then, in a region of your brain you will never consciously access, it collided with something no one else has, the specific, unrepeatable shape of your life. And it became new. You did not have that idea. The whole of human history had it. And then, after a very long journey, it chose you to finish it.